My name's Kevin and I'm from the Bird School Project, and welcome to the Bird School Project's tutorial of submitting your first piece of data on eBird.org. So this tutorial is designed assuming that you have already gone and created an account for eBird. If you have not done that, you'll need to go do that before you can submit any information to eBird concerning your observations of birds in your neighborhood or wherever you've gone birding. And once we've signed in, we'll get a really similar looking page. It's important to know that you can use some of these other tabs like Explore and Science to explore regions and explore species distributions without signing in. So you don't need an account to do that, but you do need an account to submit data, and that's what we're going to do here. And you can see this is a three-step process, and it's pretty straightforward, but I'm just going to walk us through it first time here. So let's say, just for the example, that I've gone birding earlier today at a place called Neary Lagoon. The first thing that eBird wants us to tell it is where we went birding. So it says, where did you bird? Identify the location. I can either select that from a drop-down list here if it's somewhere that I've been recently or that I've logged information for already. I can find it on this drop-down list. If not, type in Santa Cruz County and California. Now the map has populated with these orangish, reddish hotspots, and these are hotspots that are common for people to go birding in Santa Cruz. So all the different eBird users go to these spots and send in their lists of birds that they've seen, and it shows all the places where you can see the most birds in the county, where there are a lot of resources for birds. Usually they're nearby state parks or in-state parks, or here's Moore Creek Preserves, which is a nature preserve. You can zoom in further here and see here's Neary Lagoon, and that's where I said we're going to submit our checklist for today. So if you're out birding, you can use your personal location to mark a spot, or if you're at a neighborhood park or your front yard or your backyard, you can click the map to create a new spot, just like we have these blue arrows here. In this case, I'm just going to submit to the Neary Lagoon Park hotspot, and then it's going to ask me about the date and effort. If you're using the eBird app, the mobile app on your phone, it will record most of this stuff for you, but since we're entering this data on our computer, I'm going to enter here today is April 17th, 2020. If you're moving around, this is going to give us some options for observation type here, and I'll go through these real quickly. So if you're moving around at all, so if you're starting at point A and moving to point B, and you're keeping track of your observations during that time, you're going to mark that you are traveling. If you're just going to one spot, or if you have a sit spot in your backyard that you're going to go sit at, and you stay there the entire time, counting birds, you're going to mark that you are stationary. If this is a historical birding checklist that you're submitting, so say this was from 5 years ago and you want to go back and type in your estimates for birds that you saw at a particular bird count that you went to or a time you went birding, you would click historical. And historical accounts are for a time if you cannot estimate the start time and the duration of the distance. So if you have the start time and how far you went and the amount of time that you were birding, you should use traveling or stationary, even if you're submitting a historical account. But if you're just submitting a checklist, if you say you have a checklist in your journal from a long time ago and you don't remember any of that information, you can still submit at a location by clicking historical. And then incidental is, like it gives us here, these two examples. If you're driving or gardening, or say you're just out on a walk and you notice a cool bird, but you don't keep a complete checklist of all the birds in the area, or your primary purpose was not to keep a checklist of birds, then you would click incidental. But in this case, at Neary Lagoon, in our example, we were traveling, we were walking around, and our intention was to notice and keep track of all the birds that we're able to the best of our ability. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to mark the start time. Let's say I started at 2:30 in the afternoon, birding for 20 minutes. I'm going to estimate the distance. Like I mentioned, if you're using the mobile app, it will keep track of this for you. But I'm just going to estimate that I walked about 1.5 miles. I walked around Neary Lagoon, and my party size was 1. If I was birding with friends, or if we were all birding as a class, we would put in the total number of us that were out there observing. And then it gives us a space for checklist comments. Sometimes I'll use this to write down some notes about the weather and whatnot to keep track of, give me a reminder of what was going on this day. Okay, so I'm going to click continue here. And eBird is going to show me now a list of all the possible birds based on eBird data. So all the data, all the checklists that different eBird users have submitted over time to Neary Lagoon at the Neary Lagoon location in the month of April, in mid-April. It's going to take all of that information and turn it into a list for me. So based on what I put in for our date and our location, it's going to give me this list of all these different type of birds that could be at Neary Lagoon. Not just the most common, but anything that's been seen there during this time of year at Neary Lagoon. And it asks me, what did you see or hear? So I can submit observations of birds that I identified by sound or by sight. I can also sort this list by most likely, so I can click group by most likely. And if that box is checked, it's going to organize it by the most frequently seen species at Neary Lagoon. I can go through this list and I can click on birds that I saw and enter the estimates for numbers that I counted, or I can jump to species by clicking in this search bar and typing in the name of the birds that I saw. So for this checklist, I'm just going to submit let's do 2 different possible birds that you might see. Again, this is just an example, so I'm not going to actually submit this checklist, but let's say that the first bird that I saw was a song sparrow. So I can type in song sparrow, and as I'm typing, it will pop up song sparrow. So I'll go down there, and let's say I saw 2 song sparrows. I was able to count. There were 2 of them. So I'll type that in there. If I didn't have an exact number and I didn't have an estimate, I could also just put an X here instead of a 2. So something like this, like if I saw golden crowned sparrow, but I wasn't sure exactly how many. Let's say I just heard a bunch of golden crowned sparrows and I couldn't give you a good estimate. I could just put an X there to show that I saw it, that it was there, but I wasn't exactly sure the number. And then I'll give you one more example of what it looks like to make an estimate here. So let's do red-winged blackbirds. So red-winged blackbirds would be a common bird to see at Neary Lagoon. And let's say I saw a whole flock of them fly overhead, and they came down into the lagoon and landed somewhere. And I just saw them all flying together for a moment, and I could tell that it was definitely more than 10 of them, but I couldn't tell if it was 10 or 11 or 12, somewhere between 10 and 20 red-winged blackbirds. So it's okay for me to give an estimate here, as long as I'm estimating and I'm within a certain range that I thought it was. In other words, there's a big difference between 3 red-winged blackbirds and 10 red-winged blackbirds. So if I only thought I saw 3, I should put 3 here. If I thought I saw over 10, I should go with, let's say maybe there was 16 red-winged blackbirds. And that's a good enough estimate. It's somewhere right in between 10 and 20. If I saw what looked like closer to 50 red-winged blackbirds, then I would want to up this number and get it somewhere close to 50, or I could just type in 50. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about here is there's this checkbox here I could show rarities. So if I thought I identified a bird and it's not on this list, I could type it in and it's going to ask me to show photo evidence or type in some sort of evidence based on my observations. What did I see, to prove to the people that check this website for accuracy that what I'm reporting is actually what I observed. So I can show you what some of the rarities would be for Neary Lagoon here, just so you can get a sense. So now it's showing me all the rarities. So here, a Swainson's thrush. See how it says rare in orange, kind of orange-yellow here. So if I were to report a Swainson's thrush, you can see here it's going to ask me to add details. All right, so if I put 1 here, I'd have to add details by either typing in, maybe I heard it so I could describe the sound, or if I got pictures I could add media here. I could add pictures or videos or even a recording of the sound to this part right here. And then once I'm all done here, I would go over to this last question here that it asks me, are you submitting a complete checklist of the birds you were able to identify? You can interpret this as eBird asking you, were you doing your best? If every bird that you saw or heard, you made an effort to try and identify it, even if you know that you weren't able to identify all of the birds that were on your walk, but if you were trying to, you're going to click yes. If you were not trying to, or perhaps you read about a bird at Neary Lagoon that you really wanted to go see, and you just went to Neary Lagoon and you ignored all the other birds, but you went straight to find this one bird, you identified it, and then you submitted it on eBird, then you weren't submitting a complete checklist of all the birds you were able to identify. So you're going to click no, right? And then you're going to click submit. You'll submit your checklist, and I'll show you an example of what a complete checklist looks like. So here's it's got the Bird School Project's life list, so you can see we've seen 71 species as a program with students. And here's a place where you can manage your checklists. So once your checklist is submitted, it should come up in this category here, and let's just check out our checklist from back in March. So this was Tuesday, March 3rd, 2020. Looks like it was the last class period of the day at Gavilan View Middle School, which is in Salinas. And here you can see we observed 6 bird species there. Here are their names. Here's either an accurate count of the birds that we saw or an estimate. Okay, so that's it for submitting your checklist. Thanks for joining me today, and hopefully see you out there birding soon. Happy birding, everybody.